Hey guys, welcome to the Stats Guy, or the Statistics Guru, should I say. And I'm going to be going through, firstly, the t-test method. And I want to start with a background as to the foundation of statistics in psychology. And whenever I do this, I always want to talk about the case of the federal election. And the basis for statistics begins with the fact that we can't determine before the federal election which political party is going to win. But what we can do is we can do research in order to estimate the likelihood of either the Liberal or the Labour Party winning the election. So, how do we do that? Well, firstly, we have to take what's called a sample of people in Australia. And what that means is that prior to the federal election, we cannot survey every single voter in the country in order to determine which political party that they'll be voting for on election day. The reason why we can't do that is because it's impossible. No one has the resources or the money, and obviously surveying every single voter within the country um, will be basically the election itself. But what we can do is we can uh, take a small amount of people who are eligible to vote in the upcoming federal election, and we can poll them in order to determine which political party that they'll be voting for. We can do that with what's called a sample or a smaller subset of voters, let's say, as an example, 100 people. And we'll ask them which political party that they'll be voting for. Now, obviously, in Australia, there's numerous political parties, but we'll just for the purpose of this example, say that it's just the coalition or the Labor Party. So what we're going to do is we're going to take 100 people and we're going to poll them, and we're going to use the results of those 100 people, and then we're going to essentially estimate the probability of the political party winning at the upcoming federal election. And that's basically what they do when people get polled prior to the election occurring. And that's why you see in news headlines, for example, um, Labor or the coalition are tipped to win by X percentage points. So what we do is we take our sample, and there's 100 people, and what we find as a result is that 60% say that they'll be voting for Labor at the upcoming federal election, and 40 people say that they'll be voting for the coalition at the upcoming federal election. So does that mean I can take those 100 people, or the results of those 100 people, and say that on election day, all of the voters in Australia, 60% will vote for Labor and 40% will vote for the coalition, which is what I was told as part of the sample of people that I've polled, those 100 people. Well, the problem is that I can't do that, because those 100 people that I have surveyed may be different to other people in the country and their political views. Okay. And so, what would therefore happen if I took a different sample or a different group of 100 people, and I ask them again to tell me who they will be voting for at the upcoming federal election. And they might indicate to me that 55% are going to vote for Labor. So that's 55 out of 100 people, and 45 out of the 100 people are going to vote for the coalition. So what I've got here is I've got now 200 people that I've surveyed or polled, and those are two separate, I guess you could call them samples of 100 people each, and they've given me different results. So in the first example, it was 60 people that were going to vote for Labor, and in the second example, it was 55 people that were going to vote for Labor. And so what that means is I am starting to perhaps see an overall picture here in terms of the rough percentage of who's going to vote for what. But again, I don't know what the actual result will be on election day. But I've got now some information about who might be the favoured political party on the election day. And so what this means is that the first rule of statistics is when it comes to psychological experiments, what we are trying to do is we're trying to work out the effect of something on something else. And in order to do that, we need to essentially take people that are willing to participate in our research. Those people will form a sample, but like is the case with the federal election and polling, we cannot get every single person into our research that we are trying to test. We can only get a subset of people and do research like how we get a subset of people and we poll them in order to determine what those people are telling us. Okay? And the reason why we have to take those a subset of people either in our psychological research or when we poll people is because we don't have, as researchers, the money or the resources to be able to conduct research on every single person in the population. Because if we could do that, if it was possible to do that, then we wouldn't necessarily need statistics in the first place. But we can't get that information from every single person in the population. We can't, prior to the federal election, survey every single person in Australia and ask them which political party that they're going to vote for, because that would be the election itself. But what I can do is I can take subsets of people that I have the money, the time, and the resources to poll, and I can then estimate the likelihood of which political party is going to win on election day based on the results of my polling. Obviously, though, we don't do polling in the field of psychology. And obviously political polling isn't really something that will be explored in any undergraduate psychology course. But what we will be talking a lot about over the course of this semester is the polling is just an analogy to psychological research experiments. And what a lot of psychological research experiments involve is polling people. We're going to use this phrase a lot, polling people, and determining how they respond to a particular for the purpose of this example, psychological treatment. Because the whole point of psychology is we want to come up with specific treatments in order to help people. People might be depressed, they might be anxious, and as psychological researchers, we want to make those people less depressed and less anxious. That's the whole purpose behind research methods. But in order to make people or help people become less depressed or become less anxious, what we want to do is we want to determine the effectiveness of particular treatments that we've designed as psychologists, okay? So what we do is we'll start off firstly with this slide that's on the very front page, which is the design and analysis of experiments. And what we've got is we take subjects. Subjects are just people or participants who are willing to be involved in the research that we're trying to conduct. In other words, they're willing to be polled for the upcoming federal election. And I need to work out, as a research scientist, the effectiveness of a particular psychological treatment or a particular type of medication in the effectiveness of making people less depressed. Okay? So in order to do that, I take my 100 people in Australia. In fact, let's just backtrack on that a bit. So let's say that I've got a what I'll start with is saying that people in Australia, a certain amount of people within the country will have depression, okay? And I need to then determine how effective my new drug is in making people less depressed, okay? Now, ideally, what I would do as a researcher is I would take everyone in Australia who is depressed, I would give them my drug, and then I would determine whether that drug is causing every single person that has depression in Australia to become less depressed. Okay? But I can't do that again. And it's the same analogy with the polling prior to the federal election. I cannot, as a researcher, recruit every single person in Australia that has depression because I don't have the time, the money, or the resources to do so. But what I can do is I can take a subset of those people and that I can help do research on, who are willing to be subjects or who are willing to be participants in my research. Let's say, for the example's sake, it's about, I don't know,